So welcome back to the next session where Radhika will present some thoughts on decoding rebound in manufacturing and construction. And we have Amey Sapre chipping in with some comments. I've requested Radhika to be brief because we have overshot in the first session and we can't keep people hungry for too long. So, yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So we'll straight away jump to the context. So what we are trying to understand here are the two drivers of growth in FY24. So if we look at the GVA numbers for the second and third quarter, we find that there was a sharp rebound in the manufacturing sector, and construction sector continues to perform well. So what explains the rebound in these sectors? Are the drivers of manufacturing and construction sector similar, or there's some different set of drivers for manufacturing and construction sector? That is what we try to look deeply into this presentation. So what we infer from the data is that the rebound that we saw initially in the manufacturing sector was supported by lower commodity prices that we saw during the second and third quarter of the FY24. So that resulted in an increase in gross value addition in the manufacturing sector, and we'll see in a more disaggregated manner in subsequent slides. Volume-based indicators, so particularly the IIP, also showed an improvement in the latter part of the year, but the growth is very uneven in the various sectors, and it ties very well with the weak consumption that we are witnessing and the uneven consumption growth that we are seeing in the economy. So going forward, if consumption continues to remain weak and if there is a revival in commodity prices that we have already started seeing, the resurgence in commodity prices, that could pose risk to the manufacturing growth outlook. So this is the table which shows the GVA growth of the various sectors, and here what we see is that focus on the manufacturing side, the GVA in the second quarter posted growth of 14.4% for the manufacturing sector, and in the December quarter growth was 11.6%. Similarly, for construction also, there was a double-digit growth of 13.5%, slowed somewhat in the third quarter at 9.5%. So what explains this revival, particularly because in the June quarter, growth was quite subdued at 5%, and in the previous quarters also growth was subdued. So what explains this sharp rebound that we see in the second and third quarters of GVA? So one of the main factors is the fact that commodity prices have declined in the second and third quarter, and that is reflected in a difference between nominal and real GVA. So if we again focus on the row of the manufacturing sector, here we can see that the real GVA growth exceeds the nominal GVA growth. And this happens when prices are moderating. So the real GVA growth was 14.4% in the second quarter and was 11.6% in the third quarter. This was higher than the nominal GVA growth in both these quarters. And consequently, the deflator growth was also negative in the manufacturing sector. So that is one reason that gave a boost to manufacturing GVA. That was the decline in commodity prices, and we'll see a bunch of slides. We'll see a bunch of indicators that show us the broad-based decline in commodity prices in the second and third quarter. But before that, Also, if we try to estimate the gross value addition ourselves using a firm level database, the orange line is the GVA manufacturing, which is estimated by the NAS, and the black line is the GVA estimated using the firm level database. These are in nominal terms, year-on-year change growth. And how do we do that? We look at primarily the income approach, simply adding the salaries and wages, profit before taxes, depreciation, and production taxes minus subsidies. This is what gives us the GVA from the income side. But the main deficiency of the firm level database is that we do not have information on production taxes and subsidies. So we focus on the first three components: salaries and wages, PBT, and depreciation. Why we want to do this is to show you that it is the share of profits in the overall GVA has risen. And the fact that the share of profit has risen is because there has been cost compression due to decline in global commodity prices. So this is just showing the share of the three components, that is profit, salaries, and wages. And if we see, the average share of profits in the last 3 quarters was 59.18% in the overall GVA, which was higher than the average share of profits in the previous 3 quarters, that was 53.5%. So it's mainly the profitability which is driving the GVA and not, so that is one key takeaway that we see from this slide. These are showing the decline in commodity prices. The first graph is the overall Bloomberg commodity price index, and the focus has to be on the second and third quarters. We see that, from June onwards, there has been a decline in commodity prices that is reflected in the overall commodity price index, metal price index, and the last graph, the third graph, is the Brent crude oil price index. So it all shows a decline in the commodity prices. Recently, there has been a resurgence, but our attention has to be on the second and third quarter to explain the resurgence in manufacturing sector growth that we saw. World food prices, again, a very important component of the overall commodity prices because vegetable oils is a critical indicator. So we have seen that has also declined, not only in year-on-year term, but also in index term. So broadly, we see a decline in commodity prices, trying to give a boost to manufacturing sector GVA. Now let us look at the annual numbers. This is the first advance estimates that was released by MOSPI in January. And what is important is to compare the first half and second half. And here, the last two columns, if we look at, it showed a big divergence between the manufacturing growth in first and second half. First half was projected at 9.3, second half 3.9. Based on the overall GDP, we can always infer what is the second half imputed GDP manufacturing GVA growth. But in a span of 1 month, when we came to the second advance estimate, we saw that this picture changed. Now here, if we look at the manufacturing sector, first half and second half, again, look at the third and the fourth column, we see that there has been a improvement in manufacturing sector performance in the second half. So that means that initially it was thought that the rebound in manufacturing was only limited to the first half, but from January to February and looking at other bunch of high frequency indicators, the second advance estimates shows a 7.4% imputed growth, whereas in the first advance estimate, we can see the growth was 3.9% for the second half. So what happened that explains this improvement in the second half continuing? So it is not just a first half story, it continues in the second half as well. And we can look at a bunch of indicators because that is what will help us substantiate the manufacturing sector performance. And one of the indicator is the Purchasing Managers Index, which declined in October-December quarter. But again, from February onwards, there has been a perceptible improvement in the PMI manufacturing index, and it has risen to almost 59% in March 2024. Also, if we look at the IIP, now coming to the volume-based indicator. So these are index numbers, index of industrial production, cumulative index values from April to February because we do not have the March data yet. So here we see again a decent performance. The IIP shows a growth of 5.45%. IIP manufacturing shows a growth of 5.45%. And broadly from the economic activity side, we do see an improvement from 22-23 to 23-24. From the use-based classification, also we see an improvement. So here we have all the other constituents like primary goods, capital goods, intermediate, infrastructure, and consumer goods. But here, what we see is that consumer goods production continues to remain subdued. So here the index number is 137. And it's only slightly risen from the pre-COVID period of 2019-20. So so while overall IIP has risen, consumer goods production is something overall, we are not looking at the monthly volatility, but overall, if we look at April to Feb picture, we get that we have not seen a very significant increase. And if we again look at consumer goods more closely from durable and non-durable side, we see that durable goods production has hardly increased in terms of looking at the IIP and looking at its constituents with all its limitations, etc. So, but it's still below the pre-COVID level if we look at in terms of cumulative levels. So production of consumer goods is weak, and that could weigh on the manufacturing sector performance. And that is also visible if we look at the private final consumption expenditure and the sales of manufacturing sector. So while profit is doing well, sales is something that has not picked up, and it ties well with the fact that the private final consumption expenditure still continues to be weak. So these are two completely different data sources coming from completely different sources, but still they tie very well. There is a good correlation in terms of capturing the ups and downs. So private final consumption expenditure is weak, and the sales of manufacturing sector firms is also weak. So going forward, this is something that could weigh on the performance. That is also reflected in the expenditure side GDP. We've already seen that the growth is only 3% expected in 23-24, and both first half and second half growth is expected to remain 3.8 and 2.3% respectively. So this is a brief of manufacturing sector. Construction sector, what are the key drivers? So we try to just disentangle the drivers of construction and real estate sector. Construction, one is the capex push, that capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP has increased, and within that the share of capex allocation for roads, highways and railways has increased, and that has the share has increased. And given that the sector has ancillary, a lot of forward and backward linkages, that bodes well for the economy. Coming to the real estate sector, one of the factor is the regulatory changes. The Real Estate Regulatory Act has helped in clearing the bottlenecks on houses. The sector that was marred by lack of transparency and unclear contracts has seen a revival. The other more important factor is a particular section of the population which is driving the real estate sector growth, which is that, as we discussed in the previous session as well, that the export of services is not just driven by the traditional IT services, but by professional and management consulting services, and also by these global capability centers, which are offshore centers set up by companies, multinational companies, and they give some work to the GCCs. So now these global capability centers are powering the demand for real estate, particularly the commercial housing centers. And also the people who are working in these sectors are experiencing increase in employment, increase in income. And these are the particular set of people who are driving the growth in the real estate sector, which is also visible in the demand for premium housing. So the share of premium housing in the overall real estate sector has picked up, primarily due to the confluence of these factors, that is the change in export composition, the rise of global capability centers, rise of this household income of particular section. So these are the people who are demanding higher they have higher income, and this is the source of demand. The other is the HNIs who are demanding, who are coming back and increasing their demand for the real estate sector. So that is something that has happened in the particularly post-COVID period, that has given a boost to the real estate sector. These are just a bunch of indicators to show the performance of construction sector. The first is a table of share of construction sector in overall GVA on an annual basis at constant prices. So from 2020 onwards, we see that the share of construction sector in the overall GVA has increased from 8.6 to 9.13%. The second graph is the IIP and IIP infra. So we see that the IIP infra has outpaced the growth in index of industrial production, and that is also visible when we look at the use-based classification. And the third graph is the GVA estimation, like we did for manufacturing sector. It is the NSE realty sector, which shows an increase in the gross value addition. Though there is a seasonal pattern, but for at least the last 2 quarters, we see a pickup in the GVA of the companies that are part of the NSE realty index. High frequency indicators, we look at the steel consumption and cement production. These are cumulative numbers for the full financial years. We are seeing an increase in both steel consumption. We are seeing an increase in cement production. So these are all indicators to show that construction sector is driving growth within the overall economy. There are just some, I'll just conclude in 2 minutes. So the real estate sector, we look at the demand supply dynamics. Here we see that there was a period when there was a big supply overhang, in the sense that the demand for houses was much less, supply was more. And now we see that the absorption has outpaced the supply in 2023, and the sale has touched a new peak in 2023. So we've talked about some of the factors that could have driven this. And that is reflected in a decline in inventories, growing demand for luxury housing. The share of affordable houses has slightly gone down, but the share of luxury housing has picked up, that is above 10 million. Another factor that is driving this change is the compositional shift in saving that we are seeing in the household level. So the black dot is the overall household saving, and then we have the composition, the net financial savings and physical saving. So we have, this comes with the revised estimates of 22-23. We have seen that the physical savings has increased as a share of GDP from 12.8 to 13.2% in FY23. The share of financial saving has gone down. So net financial saving has gone down and physical saving has increased. And a part of this is getting allocated towards the real estate sector. So this is another pointer towards the growing demand for real estate sector, which is also corroborated by the financing of the housing loans, because personal loans, as I said, was one of the driver of growth, but it is within personal loans also, it is the housing loans that grew much faster. So personal loans grew by an average 28% in the last 3 months. Housing loans grew by 36%, and half of the outstanding personal loans is accounted for by housing loans. So there is this credit side to it also that is inducing the demand, and there is a segment of population due to the export shift that is powering the demand for the construction sector. And partly this explains the boom in the construction sector, which is also corroborated in the high frequency indicators. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Radhika.
My turn.
Your turn.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Radhika. I don't have much to add to this, but I'll just sort of highlight a couple of issues on what is the way we are discussing about both manufacturing and on construction. Since the focus, can you just go to the slide where we have on the GVA of
This one?
No. In the GVA where you have for NAS and this one. So since the focus is by and large on quarterly and on the recent performance, in the way we understand both in the national accounts as well as the way we estimate this, This is actually a very slow moving sector, but when you see quarterly and the advance estimate, they appear to be a very fast moving aggregate, thinking that, okay, quarterly movements are shown the way. So quarterly movement, the way we want to understand is just the intra-year movement. And the way Mosby does is that they take two end points of 2 years and then they make an assumption over how it grows within the year. So while we see a movement of manufacturing or construction or for any other sector, we think they are actually growing or there's a momentum to it, but they are essentially those intra-movement years. And you will see a resemblance of this in the way we do our advance estimate. This is why the quarterly series and the advanced estimate series almost entirely maps, because the methodology and the information that the CSO has to do this is exactly the same. So that's sort of one point. We should not really confuse over using high frequency movements over trying to overanalyze what this sector is. But if you want to see the deeper changes in this, the truer picture comes when you use annual data. And I'll give you some examples of this. If you see, this is the key figure. It can explain you a lot on how the sector is growing. If you see the black line, which is the way, I think this is the GVA measured by your firm level data, and the orange one is what is the NAS. The orange line, if you see, it's a combination of public sector, private sector, and households. The orange line that you see is this, and the black line, which is the GVA estimated from the organized part of the economy, which is from CMI. It's about 3,000 odd companies. Whereas the orange line is complete public sector, private sector, and households. The reason that they are matching is because we use the growth rates of the organized sector to map on the unorganized part. So the way we see these movements, we see that the entire sector is growing like this, is essentially a reflection of how the organized part is growing, which is a smaller part in composition to the larger unorganized part of manufacturing. So it does only show you one part, thinking that the overall manufacturing sector is growing like this. In reality, it may not be growing like this. So that's one part when we look at a higher frequency indicator versus a slower indicator, like let's say at an annual frequency. The other part that you rightly mentioned about deflator, can we go to the next? This one. The way we do, there is always some confusion in manufacturing, particularly on how correct we are in measuring the nominal growth versus real growth. The real problem in manufacturing is the way we use our deflator. Our deflator used in manufacturing is WPI. The reason you are getting a negative deflator here is because you are computing real divided by nominal, that's the deflator. But the real has already been deflated by WPI. And because WPI is negative, the overall deflator has turned out to be negative. But the way we use our deflators is because in manufacturing, we today have a basic problem of classifying manufacturing companies. This estimate is coming from MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. If you want to see a much more detailed analysis of manufacturing, that manufacturing story is only told by ASI, which is the Annual Survey of Industries. In the way we do the manufacturing estimates in the way we use MCA for manufacturing, there is a very big classification error between manufacturing and services. And the reason I brought it up is because if you see the disconnect between what the organized part of manufacturing is shown by MCA and the organized part shown by ASI, it will give you a slightly disconnect in how we are growing, both in stock as well as in the flow. That is one basic disconnect we have. And I'll give you just 2 pointers to compare for yourself. The number of growth in factories that ASI shows is about 1%. Whereas in MCA, if you see, we have something like 11 to 12,000 companies being registered every month in total, of which let's assume manufacturing is around 40%. So the way we show the growth in manufacturing in the organized part versus the way it grows in the way it shows in ASI in pure factory sector are slightly disconnected. So while we can see these movements, there is an uptake, there is some rebound to this. But if you consider a longer term period on an annual basis, those changes might look very small. So that's one part of why these two things move pretty much in the same direction, and it gives you a feeling that there is some rebound. The other important point which Radhika did mention is about the volume-based indicators. Can you just go to the slide where we have volume-based? Most of the high frequency numbers that we use, especially for quarterly or for even preparing advanced estimates, are entirely volume based. So we have an assumption that if cement production is growing, ultimately value addition will be growing. If consumption of steel is growing, ultimately value addition would have been growing. So while we use volume indicators, they are actually a basis of extrapolating GVA. So they, in principle, they show you a much, I won't say aggressive, but a slightly favorable picture. But while the annual data comes, it might not actually be the case in this. So there is only a small caveat in using high frequency indicators. It does show co-movement, but what will eventually happen at the annual thing might be a slightly different picture than what appears here. Can we come to construction now? Okay, construction, technically speaking, I'm just speaking from the way we do it in national accounts, is a pure black box. While we understand the way construction is computed, and construction, to my understanding, can be understood really well if we correlate the way value addition moves in construction with GFCF. That is gross fixed capital formation. We've heard one story on increase in capex from the government side, the general government. From a pure accounting perspective, if you see, the amount of capex that is going in pure construction of housing, only housing, that capital stock is added in the household sector. It is not shown in the general government sector because it's based on principle of ownership. So while you see an increase in expenditure, capital, which is purely a construction activity. So you will see an increase in value addition in construction sector, but GFCF will increase in the household sector. So all I'm trying to say is we see construction independently of other things, but if you correlate construction sector with the way capex expenditure is going and the way GFCF is rising, then it makes sense on how construction is actually moving. And this construction, if you disaggregate by general government, private corporate and household, by and large, the story is only in the public sector because there is virtually no information on construction of the household sector. So this push that you see in construction is by and large because general government is spending more on capex. And part of it is also, and the remaining part is coming from private corporate sector. The residual is what is in the household sector, which is very difficult to capture. In the last couple of years, this has been actually a very engaging problem for the statistical agency. There's been a lot of push on housing, affordable housing, but it is extremely difficult to capture the increase in capital stock in the household sector. So it probably understates, but if you were to correctly map it, probably these are understated. You will actually see a much higher increase in construction than what actually is. There is one more point on savings. The other part which we should be tying up together is the way we understand savings. And this again ties exactly with what happens in GFCF, because that part is nothing but the physical savings of the household. And we don't really have a measure of physical savings of the household, which is treated as a residual again. So this last bar that you see has been in recent debates, and Radhika has written a very nice piece on this. There's another piece which was written recently by somebody from Motilal Oswal, if I remember, which is, they have made it slightly dramatic, saying that we have reached 5.3 as the lowest lowest of financial saving proportion in the last so many years, but it has roughly been pretty much the same. And that 5.3 is because of the 13.2 errors in the 13.2 that we have. Total savings of the household is financial plus physical. If you badly measure, or if you measure badly the physical part, it also distorts the other two figures. So while we are down at 5.3, that's fine, but the same set of measurement errors are in the previous years also. But my sense is that we have now sort of compounded measurement errors, which is why we show a picture that physical savings are increasing and financial savings are increasing, but there is nothing to suggest that financial savings are going into physical savings. That part, I'm not sure. It's very difficult to say that financial savings have gone into physical savings, because if you see the disaggregation of it, a large part has gone into currency also, a large part has gone into other debt instruments also, particularly mutual funds. So it's not 100% sure that change in financial savings has gone into change in physical savings.
Part of financial savings.
Yes, ma'am, but it will affect your measure of 5.3. So the distribution between 5.3 and 13.2 is affected by what translates from financial savings into physical savings. Now, breakup hai. So we can see the breakup, whether has moved from financial to physical. That's one part. So I don't have much to say about it, but yes, may have moved. But it is very difficult to show. No, it's very difficult to show that cumulatively over the years, people have moved from financial savings to physical.
Liabilities.
Liabilities one can check. One can check on how whether.
Yes. It's tied up with increased liabilities.
In fact, it has. It has actually gone up. Liabilities of the household sector has actually been rising much faster,
Nearing 40%.
almost nearing 40%, which is one of the most substantial part. But if one can establish that that liability was taken to build up physical assets, then that would be a very nice story to sort of support. Last, I only have to conclude that while this is really nice to look at the co-movement, I think if we can supplement this by showing how this will eventually translate into an annual growth, or the position that we will reach maybe in another year or so, it will become a really good analysis. So that's all from my side. I hope I have added anything meaningful to it, but that's.
Thank you, Amir. So thank you very much. We'll break for lunch.